Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike.
Hey
Uh,
everybody.
Great to talk to you, sir. Always great to talk comics. And
I know.
today we're going to just talk a bit about why you and I are still positive about comics, why we still collect these things. Because you and I do quite a few videos. We talk about problems in the industry, things we don't like. I think we see that's a predominant thing for everybody, is where they go in and they do a lot of negative things. And so the number one question you get from people is, well, then, okay, then why the heck are you still reading?
Yeah.
And so I think what you and I wanted to talk a little bit about today is despite all the problems we have, despite all the blemishes, the warts and everything in this industry, why we still care about this medium, why we still care about these characters, why we still go to the shop every Wednesday or because of Diamond for you every Thursday and Friday to get your books and go through. And some of that I think is just because these characters matter and the storytelling format matters to us. And so, Mike, I'll kick it to you, sir, first. Comic books. Why are you still positive on them with all the issues and all the problems they have? What is it that still gets you every week to go to the shop and pick up your books?
I think it goes all the way back to my childhood and how excited I was to, spend some time sitting down on the floor of the Circle K and spinning the spinner rack and figuring out where I was going to spend my quarter. Who was going to get it? Was it going to be Captain America and the Falcon this week? Or was I going to buy an extra Batman comic and actually pick up Detective instead of the Batman comic? Um, or if I didn't have enough money, was I going to buy Avengers, which has all my favorite Marvel characters, or was I going to buy Justice League? But the joy of taking those comics home and reading them, and the color and the art and the stories just seeped in when I was a kid. And believe it or not, to this day, I still go into the comic book shop, and now they have comic book shops, and have that little youthful sense of wonder as to, even though, I may not like the current writer on this character or that character, there's always the chance that it's going to be one that's going to hit it out of the park. And I love seeing the covers and exploring new titles, finding, indie comics that I never would have thought of that I love. But in my heart of hearts, I'm still hoping that, you know, uh, every week or, throughout the year, I'll pull a couple of really good ones off the shelf. And I'm just very happy when that happens. Not every comic book is something that I really like. For example, I don't buy much from Marvel and DC anymore.
Mhm.
But right now, I'm uh, cautiously optimistic about the new gods and challengers of the unknown. So I picked those up. But that's the kind of thing that, like I'm trying to describe to you the a few weeks ago when I went into the comic shop, and there's a challengers of the unknown comic book. I'm like, who would have thunk, right? Or the new Black Lightning series that came out. I was like, I love Black Lightning. Okay, I'm going to buy Black Lightning. Um, so I still have that hopeful optimism, and more often than not, I'm surprised, and still hold out hope for some of those other characters that I truly love, like Thor and Spider Man, and Superman and Batman. That there'll be a good series for me to pick up and read again. So, and I dip my toes into the Superman, Spider Man, Batman
Yeah.
arena every once in a while and try them out and see if there's to my liking. But I love the medium. You can't go wrong with full color pictures, great art, and a fun story to read. It has the potential for a home run on any issue. For me,
Yeah.
as a medium, and for my enjoyment and my $5, $4, whatever they are, it still has a potential to be a home run on any given Wednesday.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I agree with you is the childhood piece of that enjoyment. There's so much attached to these characters. And again, I always put things in their proper context. It's not as important as like your family or your religious beliefs or things like that. But as you get older, it's nice to just have these little callbacks to things that better days or simpler days and things like that. And there's very few things that your childhood that still carry on with you as an adult. Right. I think you and I, when we talk comics, we always talk sports. Like I have so many tied in memories to watching stuff. Like, I mean, my dad went to Purdue. We were Purdue Boilermakers fans. Every time we watch Purdue play, there is a little piece of me that mentally is the same as like the 5-year-old boy who was sitting next to dad watching the next Purdue basketball game or the next Bears game. And I
Yeah.
think it's the same thing we connect with comic books, right? I think for a lot of adults, the same thing hit us when that Mario movie came out a couple years ago. Because most folks have a little bit of, as soon as you hear that little do 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 do, you're in. You're like, oh my gosh, yes, this is what I'm
It's
looking for.
Mario.
Right. And I think comic books still contain that as far as you walk by, you see Peter Parker on the shelf, Spider-Man, you see Batman, you see Wolverine, you see those characters. You can't help but harken back to the work of those great artists and those great writers. And just like you said, that potential that someone might tap that vein of just explosive storytelling and deliver the next classic story of it. I think that matters. I think the other part for me that's been a bigger part of why I still love this is I love the idea of I can do what my father did for me and have this stack of comic books and these collections that I can hand down to my kids. Like my dad wasn't the biggest comic guy, but he had a handful of Fantastic Fours and Hulks and was a master of Kung Fu and things like that. And I remember reading those with him and just being so caught up in those. And I loved, the opportunity to do it with my older kid and like having my younger son. I love the idea of, we can go in and read Batman together or whatever. And so I think that's why it does still matter is when done properly, these characters, this medium, it hits that perfect thing of entertainment, childhood wonderment, storytelling, and all of it in this really digestible and easy form. Because
Yeah.
like I still read, I would say about 4 novels a month. I try to. But like as I've gotten busier, it's harder. And some months that's one, some months that's two. But it's really difficult because like cracking down a 500-page Grisham thriller, the newest James Patterson book, it's not always the easiest thing to do because it's just a significant investment of time.
Yeah.
Comic books, it's such an easy little bite-sized, digestible thing of 20
Yeah.
to 30 pages. You flip it open, you kind of read it maybe 10, 15 minutes at most reading the book, and it's just fun. And I think when done properly, it can still do that. And I think the greatest example we saw of the timeless nature of these characters is how many of us, as old comic book fans who maybe hadn't picked up books in years, got swept into the MCU. It's
Yeah.
funny is when the MCU started, other than Spider-Man, Daredevil, and Wolverine, William Fantastic Four, those were the ones I still read, which was none of the MCU characters, right? I think those were the
Right.
only titles I was still reading was Wolverine, Daredevil, Spider-Man, and Fantastic Four. I hadn't really seen Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, or anybody other than a guest appearance in years. And so then when those movies started, it was like, oh my gosh, this is why Iron Man is so cool, or Captain
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
And you start to, it's so easy. And I think that's the thing that comic books, I wish these companies would get a little bit of is we want these to succeed. Like if you actually deliver something great, we will get on board quickly. And again, people probably get tired of the parallels to sports, but it's kind of the same thing. Like you're a Raiders fan, I'm a Bears fan, even though I'm wearing a Jets jersey right now, right? The Bears, it's so easy for me to get like 1,000% back invested with the Bears in any season. Like they can have the most disastrous season the
Yeah.
year before.
But
But as soon as they run
appreciated.
out in the field in those jerseys in a week one,
Yeah.
if there's anything they can give me that I can grapple to, I'm like, yes, this is yes. Right. And it's the same for these comic books. When we go into the store and you see Iron Man on the cover, or Spider Man, or Batman, or Aquaman, or whoever it is, you buy that book and you flip open those pages, hoping you'll see something great, hoping you'll see something that matters again. And I think it's just so much of what these characters meant to us when we were younger. And some people find that, like, me and you, I think I started reading. I was probably 4 or 5, and my brother was older than me, so he had a collection. So, I mean, basically, my entire life, I had comic books that I was reading. But there's
Yeah.
other people where they find it in their teenage years, their
Yeah.
20s. Some people find it in their 30s, and they find it and they start reading. And so, I think this medium just has that potential. Um, we try to stay positive on this. Mike, do you think we'll ever get back to where comic books has like the grasp that it used to culturally, or do you think it's just going to get more and more niche and more and more niche and kind of slip? What do you think?
It seems like it's going in that direction. But there is new hope on the horizon when you go outside of the network of the big two and you're able to deliver and hit a home run like Ghost Machine and hit several home runs. That gives me great hope that the future of comic books is still pretty bright. If you can turn out great art and a good story, it doesn't get much better than that, except for a movie or a great animated film. That the comic book is the next best thing, and it's just classic storytelling with the words and the art. And I think it's something that psychologically we recognize and enjoy. So I think there is a place for it in the future. I just think it's going to change quite a bit. And I think that new characters will be developed and a new generation will pick up those characters and carry them forward. Unfortunately, for the big two, if they don't change, revamp, restructure, remarket, and really get on board and be more hands-on with these movies that they do and more thoughtful about the material that they put out and how they can correlate and conjunct the movie and the printed material together in a more coordinated way. I just don't know if it'll survive those characters, which is tragic because we have 80 years of history with these wonderful characters that they developed. And maybe sometime in the future, somebody will come along and tell a good Superman or Spider-Man story, and it'll come back. But if they don't change their trajectory, it's probably on its way out for the big two. Now, for
Mhm.
the indie publishers that are coming on board and taking the reins of this medium and redirecting it and reinvigorating it with new ideas, more creative control, more financially beneficial for the creators. Those kind of projects could have long legs, and we've already seen how that happens with the world of streaming and how those streaming projects that they put out with various streaming services are productive and financially viable. So I really think that the medium of comic books will continue, but I just don't know about the big two. I think they're stuck in a rut. And if they don't get out of it and really do a hard look, that, are some of our favorite characters, may go out of, may go by the wayside the next, 10 years or so. You can kind of see the diminishing returns. And it's really unfortunate because, they had this huge arc of 20 years, super successful movies, but they never quite really grasped how to link the two together, like manga does, and like some of the indie publishers do with their streaming co-productions. The Flash comics never really got on board with the great Flash TV show that ran for 9 years. That was a huge chunk of
The
time.
MCU left entire
They
chunks of.
didn't do that. Or how about Smallville? I think, like, 5
Yeah,
years
after the
after.
show was canceled, they tried a comic tie-in, but
Yeah,
after the show
yeah,
had been off the air for
like
all
five
those
years.
years,
And it's like, oh my God, what a huge miss. You think they would have learned from that, but Smallville was so successful. Like, what was it, seven, eight, 9,
years. I think they had
10?
200 something episodes. Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. It was 10 seasons, and they had a decade.
but they
Nobody up
never
at
figured
DC,
like, hey, what if we
no,
put this
nobody
in a
up at
comic
DC
book
said,
form?
"Hey, has anybody been watching Smallville lately? Like, maybe we could do a." That never occurred to anybody. Like, I don't know. Maybe it was written in the contract that they weren't allowed to, but oh my gosh, when you sign those contracts, you got to say yes, and our publishing wing will have license to produce, others. You gotta think about those things, because here we are, 25 years later, and DC's on the ropes, and Marvel's not too far behind it, and the only books that sell are Batman and Spider-Man, and it's just like, What are we doing, guys?
Yeah, I think the thing is there's two sort of things why I try to stay somewhat positive on it. Because I do see a lot of people, and it's funny, we get, we're not the biggest channel on anything by any means. We get comments on ours, and I do see a lot of people when we do videos sometimes where they go, it's not even anger anymore at the big two. They're just, I'm more apathetic. Like I
Yeah.
just don't care. Like I'll always love that character, but they burned me so many times that I just he didn't make me hate Iron Man. He just made me stop reading. Is kind of the sentiment I get from a lot of people.
I am
And
the exact same way.
and I
I
think
don't
the thing
hate,
is,
yeah.
I do think comic books the big two because I think you're right on the indies. I think it's not the comic book medium that will ever die. Manga shows people are still reading. There are these online publishers that are selling millions of dollars worth of material. The indie books like Ghost Machine, which we just did a video on, some of these other indies, and I think even Conan has been a revelation for us the last couple of years of this great older
So
character that we
good.
probably lost track of for 10, 15 years. We used to read these old pulp fun novels of, and now it's
Yeah.
back in comic format because you got a publisher behind it who really cares and puts passion behind it. James Bond's been really interesting for me, and that I used to love reading James Bond novels. Those have really kind of dried up the last 5 or 6 years. But Dynamite has pretty consistently put out a James Bond comic book for a decade now. And it's great because I get to dive into this character that I love and read new adventures. And so I do think what has to happen for the big two, uh, and again, this is where I love sports and comic books, and I think they're kind of similar. I
Hmm.
am a huge hockey fan. One of the things about hockey is hockey had to hit its rock bottom for it to actually build back. Hockey, I think it was 03, 04, had a lockout happen, and they literally went a season where the players did not play a game. And it was after a couple disappointing years before where you had some franchises people really didn't like. Winning the Stanley Cup, there was no excitement. The league seemed dead. It was post Wayne Gretzky. Hockey was on the ropes, and then the lockout happened. And there was a lot of people who thought might never come back. But that low point was what hockey needed to realize we have to evolve the game. And so they got rid of some of these things like the two-line pass and different rules that were making the game slower. They opened the game up. They made it more fast-paced. They made scoring more happen more often. They made it more interesting. They started putting salary cap rules in that made it that building dynasties was really, really hard because it was hard to pay all the players. And that meant that you'd have teams that couldn't go into the basement for 10 years and be awful, and one team could be great. Because if you went back in the history, basically, the Montreal Canadiens won like 20 something cups and everybody else got to be in second place. Hockey had to hit its rock bottom. And then it figured we can reformat, we can put the salary structure the right way, we can change the rules. And hockey's back now. Now, it's never going to be as popular as the NFL or the NBA or even baseball. But from where hockey was 20 years ago, it's in a much healthier place. And its fans really, really love it now because it figured out how do we refine this and build up those people. I think that's what the big two need to have happen is they need to hit rock bottom. Because the thing is, the passion, like much like hockey, the passion of hockey fans didn't go away. We just got tired of all these stupid rules that didn't work anymore and these nuances that were boring and made the game and the fact that it felt like the players and the owners didn't care and you'll literally give us no hockey for a year. And I feel like that's where people kind of seem to be with comic books right now, where it's not that we don't care. It's that you've kind of ruined this. You've done these stupid tie-ins and these events and all these constant renumberings and all these things, and we're just tired of it. And I feel
Yeah.
like the passion for the characters doesn't go away because look, as much as like my kid doesn't read comic books anymore, he's been obsessed with that Marvel Rivals game since it came out.
Yeah. Mine
Constantly
too.
playing that. And I go in and
Mine
he's
too.
always Iron Man on
Yeah.
that game. And it's funny because that was his childhood. He was Iron Man.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
walking
Yeah.
around with the fake
Yeah.
little repulsor things, even at like 10, still
Yeah.
doing that, thinking it was
Yeah. Yeah.
fun and
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
fun and going to collect Marvel Legends figures of Iron Man. And just, I mean, my wife has all these old pictures of him where he's a kid. And he's got the Tony Stark shirts on and things. And that disappeared because the comics didn't meet him where he was and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But they go in there. It's not that he doesn't care about Iron Man anymore because he's upset. He's obsessed with playing that game, right? He used to love Superman, Injustice. I still walk in there and see him playing as Superman on that game. His love of Superman didn't go away. His love of Iron Man didn't go away. The comic books just stopped meeting him where he was. And
And,
I think that's the thing is as long as that passion's still there, if they hit rock bottom, maybe they'll finally go, you know what? We need a new format. We need a new pricing structure. We need maybe a new release schedule. We need to be more consistent. Much like some of these other businesses that have bounced back, I think they need to hit their rock bottom because
but
that fan passion is still there. And maybe
yeah,
then they can build something back that'll be better, or at least reclaim a lot of the fans you lost.
I think so. And yeah, I will always love those legacy characters. And like I said, on any given Wednesday, I'm still excited to go in and look at the wall and see what came out. And every once in a while, I'll dip my toes in and try a Batman book out here or there, and see if I like it. I tried with the X-Men. I didn't really like it. I tried recently with, but you never know. And the love of the format, it's so, like you said, it's bite size, it's exciting. You can't go wrong with, a full color panel with a good story and good art. It's just so enjoyable to read. And I stay ever optimistic that, someday, like I'll pick up Spider-Man again, like the Ultimate Spider-Man
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
out right now, and love it. So I still get excited about comics, and I'm open to trying. And I'd love to be buying more books every month, but I buy what I buy. And no, I think the future of the industry is good, especially when you see how Ghost Machine is doing. If they can replicate that and keep it going for a decade or more, I think it'll save the medium. And other
Mhm.
people like Titan, putting out good solid material. Mad Cave,
No,
um,
man, Mad Kid has been doing really well with Flash Gordon.
good solid material. Dynamite, Dynamite has got some good stuff. Um, and they're not the characters that we grew up with that we love, but it's still exciting and fun to read, and I'll be
Well, they're
willing to
doing a
put
great
my
job
money
with
down.
licensing and some of the other ones with like Mad Kid got Flash Gordon. Like that's it's not a character that like I remember from my childhood, but it is a character I know. And it's like, okay, I'll
Yeah.
check that out. Right. Dynamite has a lot of like Johnny Quest and Thundercats and what I
Space
think they said
Ghost.
it's Silverhawks and James Bond and these different characters. And it's like, okay, that may not be like my absolute favorite thing, but there is something, oh, cool. It's not nothing. And I think that licensing piece, that's the interesting thing that I think could happen in the next decade that I am looking forward to is once upon a time, I thought public domain getting some of these things was going to be the worst thing ever. I actually am incredibly
Maybe
excited
not.
for, and yes, there will be the idiots who produce the equivalent of the Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey horror movie version of these things.
Yeah.
But I do think it also will be in a couple years when Superman hits the public domain, and yes, I know it'll have to be the Superman who's, from the first appearance, so he probably won't have all the same abilities and powers, and they'll have to wait to introduce things. But I will say, I do think there's probably going to be an opportunity. The same way, look, Conan's been in the public domain, and there's been some decent storytelling. And I know, like, there's an official estate that handles things too, but that gets
Yeah.
everybody access to all of it. But I do think, what I was once dreading is, a decade from now, when Batman and Superman enter the public domain we might get someone who has the equivalent of like what Jim Zub has done with Conan, where you have this creative
Yes.
who just loves the medium and loves Robert Howard's work and loves everything about it and is like, no, I want to make stories that feel like that. You might get someone who DC's told, hey, you can't write Batman, you can't write Superman, we're not doing stories like that anymore, who might get it in the public domain and go, man, I've been waiting to tell this Superman story, and now I can finally do it. And I think that could be the big game changer. And it's hilarious because man, that was once the thing I was most dreading of like, oh man, can you imagine when these characters go public
I'm
domain?
not worried about it anymore. I
Now I'm like,
think,
look, yes, there's gonna be the idiotic, over the top
but
stuff, but there will also
yeah.
probably be someone who does some really solid storytelling
Can you imagine
and can
like if
tell us some good
Titan
novels.
or Dynamite got a hold of, they would do a quality book, or Mad Cave. they would do a quality book. And so, yeah, I'm still excited to go to the comic store. How about you, Reed?
I still look forward and I think what you might point out too, every month you go and you kind of get to, I remember, DC had really creatively sort of lost me like a decade or 15 years ago. And I was still picking up, but there was just not a lot of passion behind it. Like it was like, I have a long box, I'm going to keep adding issues. And then out of nowhere, Jeff Johns kind of seemed to just take over things. And it was his Green Lantern. I mean, that was as exciting as I was ever to go to the comic book store month is to read that story. And that was a decade long story. And then he spilled that into his Justice League run and he did stuff with Shazam and The Flash and Aquaman. I think Jeremy Adams is a writer like that right now, where it's like, had I not been reading comics, man, that Flash run he did was fantastic. And what he's doing on Green Lantern's great. And what he did, I hope he does on Aquaman. And that's where I would say I still am optimistic is I do think despite the amount of, to be honest, junk that's out there, and that's using the most polite word that I can think of, there are still the Jim Zubs and the Jeremy Adams and the Scott Snyders and Jeff Johns at Ghost Machine now. And I think even like Brian Hill, who does a great job on the Ultimate Black Panther book, Christopher Priest still writes some great comic books out there. There are still some great creatives working in this environment who give them the right character, the right book at the right time. They can produce magic. And so, yeah, I have to be a little more selective with what I buy. And yes, it's not fun that like the X-Men aren't fun to read anymore. Like I wish that book existed, but there's still a lot of good stuff on there. And what I will always say, like you pointed out, we're always just one good issue away from getting me back in. I think that's
I
that
know, I
if
know.
someone would throw out, hey, it's a new X-Men #1, and we've got Jean and Logan and Scott and
Yeah,
Beast and
yeah.
them, and they're all in the classic costumes and they're on the cover, and we're
I'm
gonna
buying
present
that
them as
issue.
heroes again. I'm back in. Like I'm back in instantly. You have my buy-in. I don't care
Yeah.
whatever. And it's very similar to like sports stuff where like the Bears, the Bulls, the Blackhawks, the White Sox, my favorite teams, they can make me mad. But every year I'm going to show up and watch the first couple games. And
Yeah,
all you got to do is just give me something I can grasp onto, some hope
I
where I go,
know.
you know what? And I'm 100% back in. And I think that's all they got to do is if they can just, I'm hoping comic books watching all these other things ascend and get to it. They'll either hit their rock bottom and realize they need to format, or
I
maybe it
just
doesn't even get to where they need to hit rock bottom. I'm hoping there's some self-realization at some point with them where they go, you know what, guys? It ain't that people aren't reading this anymore. It ain't that people don't like the characters. Maybe it's something we're doing. And then maybe
if
they can
they
sit there. And that's, I think that's the thing is I just keep waiting for that moment where it hits them like, oh, wait, like people aren't, people don't hate Peter Parker. Because when we put a movie out, that's a
they
billion
love
dollar
it.
movie. And
Yeah,
we put a cartoon out, millions of people watch. And when we do a video game,
yeah,
millions of people buy. And we're still selling toys off the shelves. Geez,
yeah.
maybe it's not that he's broken. Maybe we're doing something wrong. and
I
and I
know.
think
Yeah,
I'm hoping as they see these dwindling sales and these things that they look and go, no, guys, maybe we just need to do some back to basic stuff and build it back up. And um, I'm
I'm
always
waiting.
optimistic at some point they'll see it.
I'm waiting for that day. I'm waiting for that X-Men comic to come out because I'm telling you, Marvel, if you put out an X-Men classic and forget about all these like spin-off, whatever is going on, you're gonna
Uncanny,
bring back
astonishing, X Force or whatever. Yeah.
astonishing X farce or whatever, you're going to get this diehard DC fan to go down to the comic shop and buy an X-Men comic because I love the X-Men, but I haven't bought them in a long time. You just got to give me the original team back so I understand what's going on.
That's the craziest thing is they are literally, I think for most characters, you're one great issue away from getting people
Exactly.
to be back in. And I think,
I know they're going to do it eventually. Once they get
well,
whatever this is out of their
and to
system.
me, to where it's possible, I mean, and look, I read a lot of Green Lantern as a kid. My dad bought me a lot of Green Lantern comic books. And
Yeah.
I had that, I think it was issue 50 or something. It was this weird kind of graphic cover, but it was where Hal Jordan went bad. And Hal Jordan snapped and killed all the Green Lanterns. And I
Oh,
remember reading
yes.
that in the Emerald Twilight. And I mean, as much a character assassination as you'll ever get. I mean, literally, let's turn him into a bad guy. All it took was Jeff Johns on Green Lantern Rebirth, rebuilding, and like in 5 issues, Hal's back.
Yeah.
And then it became like the best decade of Green Lantern stuff. And all it took was one guy, one idea with enough passion behind it and some great art where it's like, and then you're back in it and it evolves into, this, oh my gosh, this is the best Hal Jordan stories ever when they had just thrown him under the bus and destroyed. And it just shows how easy this is to turn it. Ultimate Spider-Man. I know so many Spidey fans who'd been burned by ASM for years. And that first day, it was just we put him married with Mary Jane. That's it. That's it. I'm back in. Like I mean, I remember my older brother. He dropped the book when they did this. What was it? I'm losing the name of it right. But that stupid story where he sells his marriage to Mephisto. One More Day.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was it. I don't think he ever picked up another Spider-Man comic book after that. He was done. And he was a guy who monthly, I think he was on the subscriber list for back when they used to do mail comics to you of
Yeah.
Spectacular Spider-Man, and every Spider-Man was there. That issue happened. He stopped, period. Ultimate Spider-Man came out. He heard about it. He's been back in. Every month he's going to the shop. And that's the thing with this is all you got to do is get one. And that's where I am still hopeful is no matter how bad the character is, it just takes one creative with the right idea. Let us
Exactly.
let us know what you guys think. What do you think about comics? Are you still optimistic about the future of comic books? Is there something that keeps you going to the door? If you're somebody who's apathetic, this is who I'd be interested in hearing from. If you're
Yeah.
apathetic on comic books, is there anything they could do that would get you to be reinvigorated and go read the character? I think that's always an interesting thing. As always, folks, let us know what you guys think below. God bless you. I hope you have a great week, and we'll catch you in our next video.
Thanks, everybody.